Chapter 65, 4th Year, January. Wednesday, the 8th of January, 1975. Dumbledore was quite right. The Fraser family's murder was front-page news on Boxing Day, followed by a series of features and articles on the mounting war, which dominated the rest of the Christmas break. It was the first time Remus, or any of them, ever saw the Dark Mark. They had no idea that it was a symbol they would fear for the rest of their lives. A great black skull with a gaping mouth and a long ropey serpent withering forth. It was distinctly Slytherin-esque, and as soon as they were back at Hogwarts, Sirius blasted the remaining snake motifs off his trunk. "Careful, mate," James said, as smoke from Sirius's spell filled the room. "You might be ruining a family heirloom there." "I don't give a shit," Sirius replied, firing his wand at the blackened wood once more, for good measure. "It's mine, and I don't want anything of mine to have that ruddy mark on it." It was pointless trying to reason with him. Since Dumbledore's visit to the Potters, Sirius's hatred for anything remotely Slytherin had increased tenfold, and he had been using hexes to defend younger students from Slytherins all year, but now he seemed to be actively seeking out trouble. "The war isn't happening here," Remus tried telling him once, after his third detention in as many days. "Dumbledore told us to be vigilant, not start fights." "The war is everywhere," Sirius replied, and James nodded in agreement. "Anyway, you can talk. What about you and Snape?" "That," Remus replied piously, "was personal." It was true. He didn't hate Snape because he was a dark wizard or a Slytherin or anything like that. Remus didn't like Snape because he was a nosy busybody. That, and nobody really liked Snape, except Lily. Actually, Remus thought to himself as he looked across the common room at Lily, sitting by Marlene working on some sort of transfiguration spell on a pair of shoes. Even Lily hadn't been hanging around Severus very much these days. Perhaps they'd fallen out. The redhead looked up and met his eyes, smiling brightly. He smiled back. James, sitting next to him, waved, and Lily rolled her eyes and returned to the spell she was working on. "Doesn't she know how much I've matured?" James sighed heavily, thumbing the pages of his textbook roughly. "I don't know if snogging a muggle in the back of the cinema really counts as maturing," Remus replied, rescuing the man-handled book and smoothing down the corners James had bent. "I didn't mean that," James grinned. "Just like, in general. I don't get it. I get on with Marlene okay." "You're on the Quidditch team with Marlene," Peter said. "You've got stuff in common with her." Peter had become very wise since getting a girlfriend. "So what?" James said slowly. "You think I should try and get Lily on the Quidditch team?" Peter tutted pitifully. "Why don't you find out something you both have in common? Like how me and Desdemona both like chess and cheese sandwiches and..." "We've got nothing in common," James replied dreamily. "That's why I like her." "Never going to happen then," Peter sniffed with an air of finality. James looked crestfallen. "Don't listen to him," Remus said, taking pity. "People don't just go out with people because they're the same. That'd be boring. Opposites attract and all that." "Yeah, you're right, Moony," James cheered up. "Maybe I should find out what sort of things she likes, though." Yeah, might be a start." Remus shook his head, returning to his charms essay. He'd made his peace with the girl obsession now. It was just easier to nod and pretend to be sympathetic. Fortunately, most of James and Sirius's attention was taken up with training on the upcoming Quidditch match against Slytherin, which was set for early February. With the war looming over everyone, the competition between the two houses had taken on a very new and important meaning, and Sirius and James treated their positions on the team as full-time occupations. As a consequence, Remus saw very little of them at the beginning of the spring term. He spent much of his time in the library, as usual, and when the other two went on the pitch practicing, with Peter watching, of course, they were in detention for one thing or another. There was hardly time to work on the map, or even plan a new prank. The marauders passed each other like ships in the night. The situation grew so extreme that when the first Hogsmeade weekend rolled around halfway through January, Remus found himself without anyone to go with. He almost considered not going at all, until Lily brought it up after potions one afternoon, suggesting that he go with her, and, he assumed, Mary and Marlene. It sounded like a nice enough way to spend his Saturday. He remembered that he still owed Lily a present for Christmas. As agreed, Remus met Lily in the common room on Saturday morning, and they started down towards the Hogwarts front entrance. "What happened to the M's?" Remus asked, surprised when he found they were alone. Lily blushed, but that might have been just the cold air. "I thought it could be just the two of us this time." "Fair enough," he smiled. He liked Lily's company very much, almost as much as the marauders. "So, what are they all in detention for?" she asked, as they trudged through the snow to the village. "Various things." Remus waved his hand. "Peter got caught out of bounds after dark. James got the blame for changing the words on the Slytherin trophies, and I think Severus hexed a second year." "Typical," Lily tutted. "Yeah." Remus grinned as they trudged through the snow, following the trail of dark-robed students ahead of them. "The trophy thing was brilliant, though, you have to admit. The charm lasted 7 days. "It wasn't a very nice thing to do, though." Lily frowned. Remus sighed. Why did girls always have to be nice? Once they reached the village, they stopped at the stationer's because they both needed new quills. Remus bought one for Sirius, and one for Peter too, because they'd asked, telling Lily how Peter pressed too hard on his parchment and snapped 2 quills in a week, leaving blotches everywhere, and how Sirius only used the most expensive brand because he was vain about his handwriting. After that, they went to the post office, where Remus sent the Potters a package on James's behalf. It was Mrs. Potter's birthday, he explained to Lily, and James hated missing any occasion to give a gift. Freezing cold by then, they decided that a Butterbeer had to be the next port of call, and opted for the 3 broomsticks. They found a small table by the fireplace and sat companionably, chatting about their lessons and their Christmases. Lily had had a big fight with her sister, which she talked about at great length. Remus told her about going to see Death Wish, but didn't mention Dumbledore's visit. "Do you go to the Potters every year, then?" Lily asked. "Yup," Remus nodded fervently. "They're amazing. Me and Sirius always go, and Pete's only up the road from James, so that's cool." "Are you 4 always together?" Lily looked amused. It rubbed Remus up the wrong way. "They're my friends, my best mates." "I know that," she replied, sounding a bit snippy herself. "But you've been talking about them all afternoon." "Have not?" Remus grunted defensively, looking into his Butterbeer embarrassed. "So what if I have?" "Well, I sort of wanted to get to know you a bit better, not your friends." Lily had 2 red patches on her cheeks now, like a Dutch doll. Remus couldn't understand why she was so annoyed. "You know me, though. You've known me for 4 years. Lily stared at him, disbelieving. Then her expression changed. She ran a hand through her hair and laughed humorlessly. "Oh, Remus," she sighed. "What?" She shook her head. "I'm such an idiot. You really have no idea why I wanted to spend the weekend with you, do you?" He shrugged. She smiled, giving him that pitying look that girls were so good at. "Never mind," she said. "Don't worry about it." After that, the tone of the afternoon seemed to change. Lily appeared to relax into her usual self and started joking along with him. She even had a bit of a whinge about Snape, who'd said something extremely rude to Mary recently. Remus never got to the bottom of why she'd been so moody in the first place, but he decided that it might just have been his mentioning his friends. She'd always been clear about finding them annoying. She would only accept the price of a butterbeer from him as a way of present, and assured him that he needn't feel like he owed her anything. It wasn't until the next day, when Remus, James, Sirius and Peter were sitting at breakfast, that everything became clear. James and Sirius were in their Quidditch robes ready for practice, furtively discussing tactics, while Peter listened with deep interest, nodding and murmuring, "Yeah, exactly," now and then. Remus was checking his book list. He had several to return, and a few more he still needed to cross-reference before he could complete his Transfiguration essay. Marlene settled down next to them, in her own red robes, and searched for the tea. "So," she addressed Remus, "how did yesterday go?" He asked, looking up from his parchment. "Yesterday?" "You and Lily, in Hogsmeade." She was giving him a very knowing smile. "She won't tell us what happened, so it must be good." "What are you talking about?" "Yeah," Sirius looked up curiously. "What are you talking about, McKinnon?" "Didn't he tell you?" She stirred sugar into her tea innocently. "Remus and Lily went on a date yesterday." "What?" James, Sirius and Remus all exclaimed at the same time. Sirius began to laugh. "Moony? On a date? With Evans?" James looked horrified. "Bloody hell," Peter said. "It wasn't a date," Remus said, slamming down his quill, as if he'd said the words. He felt a horrible sinking feeling. Had it been a date? How were you supposed to know if people just ambushed you like that? He looked at James desperately. "But I don't fancy Lily. She's just a friend." "Yeah, I know, mate," James said, though Remus didn't think he sounded very sure. "It's fine. I'll see you after practice." With that, James got up and left the table. Sirius stared after him for a moment, then looked at Remus, then back at James, before shrugging helplessly and getting up to follow his friend out of the hall. Peter followed shortly after, and Remus lay his head on the table groaning. "Wow, sorry, Remus," Marlene said very quietly. "I had no idea. James really fancies her then." Remus groaned again before getting up and grabbing his books. "I'm off to the library," he said, not looking at her. He didn't go to the library though, in case Marlene went to find him there, or worse, told Lily and Mary where he was. For the first time since his second year, Remus went into hiding. The problem with this, of course, was how much he'd grown since his second year. Many of his usual nooks and crannies were simply too small now. In the end, he settled himself behind the statue of the humpbacked witch just inside the passageway to Honeydukes. It was dark, but he lit his wand for light, and the faint smell of chocolate was very comforting. He tried to read, but his brain wouldn't let him concentrate. It seemed to just keep playing his visit to Hogsmeade over and over. Had Lily said something he had missed? Had it been in her body language, maybe? Had she dropped hints? Would James have understood them? Would Sirius have? It was very unfair, Remus thought to himself pitifully. Lily was a very good friend. Why would she want to muddle it all up with feelings and holding hands and kissing? He really hoped he wouldn't have to talk to her about it now. Maybe she was just as embarrassed as he was. Worst of all, what if James never spoke to him again? He didn't know how to explain that he didn't see Lily in that way. Not when every other Gryffindor in their year seemed hell-bent on coupling up. Maybe he ought to have snogged Marlene when she'd offered back in November. He wondered if they'd all leave him alone once he got over it. "You have to start snogging girls sometime," he told himself. "Everyone does, it's normal." But not Lily. He couldn't do that to James. In fact, Remus decided that was probably the very reason he wasn't interested in her, because otherwise she was extremely pretty, funny, kind, clever, and better than him at charms. Lily was just the sort of girl he would fancy, Remus knew for sure. It was just that his friendship with James was much more important. Feeling very enlightened and self-sacrificing, Remus emerged from his hiding place. He set off down the nearest staircase, planning to go to the Quidditch pitch and catch the last few minutes of practice. After that, he would do something nice for James, offer to read over his history essay or something. Yes, then everything would be right in the world again. But, as Remus had once been told, the best laid plans often go wrong. He was just nearing the bottom of the grand staircase, taking it 3 steps at a time just because he could, and not really looking where he was going. He knocked headlong into another student coming up. "Watch it, mudblood," Severus Snape snarled, scrambling to his feet, glaring at Remus. Remus tutted. "Piss off, Snivelus. I'm as much a half-blood as you are." "You and I have nothing in common, I assure you," Snape replied haughtily, brushing off his robes. "I suppose when it comes to hygiene standards, careful, loony Lupin," Snape narrowed his beady eyes. "Don't say something you'll regret." "Oh, bugger off," Remus replied impatiently, stepping forward. "I haven't got time for this. Either curse me now or get out of my way." Snape stepped to the side at once, giving a flourish of his hand to show Remus that he was free to go. It was disconcerting, but Remus couldn't worry about that now, and continued on his way. Chapter 66, 4th year, February. James Potter was a much more complex person than he appeared at first glance. Outwardly, he was happy, self-assured, usually kind, if a little bit arrogant, and generally popular with everyone. He got a lot of detentions, yes, but on the whole he got good marks, and most of the teachers were still quite fond of him. He made the most of being on the Quidditch team, messing up his hair deliberately, so that he looked like he had just finished flying, wearing his red robes at every opportunity. But no one could say that he hadn't earned the right. You only had to see him play to know that his big-headedness was not misplaced. Above all, James Potter was loved. His parents spoilt him and instilled in him the notion that there was nothing he couldn't do, that no door would ever be closed to him. Sirius, Peter and Remus all looked up to him, appointing him leader in almost every venture. And all in all, he was admired throughout the school by everyone who mattered, and envied by everyone else. Except for Lily Evans, of course. She was the thread that seemed to unravel everything else in James's life. Having grown up surrounded by love, freely given and carelessly accepted, James found it very troubling that someone he liked might not like him back. It was the reason he acted like an idiot whenever Lily was present, and the reason that he stopped talking to Remus for a week during the early spring of 1975. He wasn't being nasty or doing it deliberately. Remus knew James well enough to understand that. It was just that his feelings had been hurt, and, as someone who had rarely experienced hurt feelings, wasn't sure how to handle it. At least Sirius blew up at you when you annoyed him, so that could be quickly solved. Peter would sulk, and Remus would probably try to throw a punch. But James just went quiet. "He's not angry with you," Sirius explained, when James went to bed one night as soon as Remus arrived in the common room. "He's just feeling sorry for himself." "He does believe me, though, doesn't he?" Remus asked anxiously. "I really didn't know it was a date. I don't like Lily in that way." "Well, I don't think he thinks you're lying exactly, but you are pretty close to Evans, aren't you? Always going around together." "She's my friend," Remus said, exasperated. "I go round with Marlene and Mary too. No one thinks I'm going out with them." "Actually," Sirius smirked, "there was a rumour last term." "Oh, for God's sake!" It was impossible. As for Lily, she was being reliably mature about the whole thing. Remus assumed Marlene had filled her in on the situation, but she didn't press it, and they were able to continue as potions partners as normal. James and Sirius, however, had moved their workstation to the back of the room. By Friday dinner time, Remus was truly miserable. Unlike James, he had not grown up surrounded by love, and he found that his friendship with the Marauders had become so important that he suffered deeply from the loss of it. He still sat with them for meals, but there was an uneasy quiet instead of their usual raucous banter. Sirius kept trying to turn the conversation towards the upcoming Gryffindor versus Slytherin match, but that only seemed to darken the mood. Making matters worse, Lily, Mary and Marlene had sat themselves close to Remus. They were feeling sorry for him, and being girls, were trying to cheer him up by doing exactly the wrong thing. "I'm looking forward to the match," Mary smiled cheerfully. "All of the Hufflepuffs and Ravenclaws I've spoken to are supporting Gryffindor too." Lily sighed heavily. "Why does it always have to be so black and white? No one's good all over, or bad all over, not even Slytherins." "You can't blame us, Lily," Marlene replied. "Even if it's not all of them, most of the Slytherins have been utterly foul this year." "Speak of the devil," Mary lowered her voice suddenly, shooting a filthy look over Lily's shoulder. Lily and Remus turned around to see Severus Snape standing there, with an odd smile on his face that was anything but joyful. "Hello, Lily," he said softly. "Hi, Sev," Lily replied, with a forced sort of politeness. "What's up?" "I just thought I'd check to see if you wanted any extra help with the potions assignment. It's very complex." "I know," she replied, irritated, "but I'm sure I'll manage." Bang! Everyone at the table jumped and spun around to stare at the end of the hall, where Mulciber had just let off a firecracker at the far end of the Slytherin table. He was laughing heartily as the whole school looked on terrified. 5 points from Slytherin!" McGonagall shouted, marching up the aisle between the tables. "And you'll clean that mess up at once!" Dinner returned to normal. Snape was still standing there. Lily looked up at him. "As I said, Remus and I will manage," she said. "I'm not stupid, you know, Severus." "I never said you were." Snape looked genuinely upset by this. Oh, never mind." With that, he cast an unpleasant glance at Remus, then swept away back to his own table. "Weirdo," Mary muttered. "Leave him alone," Lily snapped. She looked so fierce that Mary didn't even have a comeback. Have any of you had any luck with that hinky-punk essay?" Marlene asked quickly, trying to keep the peace. "Mine's crap." "I'll lend you my notes if you want," Remus offered, taking a gulp of his pumpkin juice. "Once Sirius gives them back." Sirius looked up, hearing his name spoken. "Oh yeah, sorry, Moony. Hang on, they're in my bag." He began digging around in the junkyard that was his book bag, pulling out scrunched up balls of parchment, dung bombs, sweets and broken quills. "How do you find anything in there?" Remus sighed, sipping some more pumpkin juice. "You're the messiest person I've ever met." Sirius shrugged and winked at him, withdrawing the notes and handing them to Marlene. "Oh, Remus, did I tell you I had another letter from Darren this week?" Remus groaned. "Yes," he whined, "and it was just as boring as the last 500 letters you've made me read." Sirius snorted. Marlene dropped her fork. Mary looked horrified and opened and closed her mouth a few times. Remus frowned. Why on earth has he said that? Of course it was true, but it was horribly thoughtless and mean. "Sorry," he said, looking down. He felt strange. Maybe the James thing was getting to him even more than he thought. "No, I'm sorry," Mary said, standing up, her lower lip trembling. "I won't bore you any more then." She turned quickly and left the room, her plate of food half eaten. "Mary!" Marlene got up, running to follow her. Lily looked at Remus. "Did you mean that?" "Yes," he said promptly. Actually, I find all of this boyfriend-girlfriend stuff boring. I'd wish you'd just all leave me alone. Once he stopped talking, he blinked, surprised at himself. Why was he saying these things? Remus, Lily said, looking shocked. Though made of sterner stuff than Mary, she didn't leave. There's nothing wrong with Mary wanting to talk about her boyfriend or, teenagers having crushes. It's normal, isn't it? Don't care if it's normal, he shrugged. I think you're all acting like idiots. Even you. Why on earth would you want to go out with me when the most popular boy in school is madly in love with you? He's 10 times nicer than me too. You're just too arrogant to see it. Remus, Lily said again, turning red. Well, it's true, he said helplessly. Moony, Sirius said finally, are you okay? I'm fine. Still a bit hungry though. Think Mary will mind if I finish her potatoes? Seriously, Remus, James piped up unexpectedly. This isn't like you at all. Just being honest. Yeah, brutally Oh, Merlin. Sirius slapped his forehead. Evans, did Snape put something in his drink when the fireworks went off? He would never do something like that. It's illegal. Psst, Remus snorted, mouthful of mashed potatoes, as if Snivelus gives a toss. He's been trying to get back at me ever since I ate him on the train. You what? Lily stared at him. Yeah, Remus swallowed. Nutted him right in the head. It was great. He knew there was something wrong, but he couldn't seem to help it. The truth just came spilling out. Right, Sirius stood up. Stop talking, Moony, before you say something you'll really regret. Those words dislodged a memory in Remus's mind. You know, he grinned, that's exactly what Snape said on the stairs the other day. Severus! Lily shouted at the top of her voice. She got up and stormed over to the Slytherin table, Sirius, James, Remus and Peter in tow. What have you done to Remus? She demanded, stamping her foot angrily on the flagstone floor. Why'd you ask? Severus smirked cruelly. You tell me how to fix him right now. There's nothing wrong with him, Severus replied calmly. Is there, Remus? Nothing really, Remus shrugged. I do keep saying things I shouldn't though, like, shut up! Sirius kicked him, hard in the shins, distracting Remus from spilling his guts to Snape. Sirius rounded on the Slytherin boy. You bastard, it's Veritaserum, isn't it? Truth potion. One way to find out? Severus's smile broadened. What's your deepest, darkest secret, Lupin? Oh God, where to start? Remus thought to himself. He knew he shouldn't say anything, mustn't say anything. He would be in such terrible danger if anyone found out. But he wanted to so badly. He had so many secrets, and they were all swimming into the surface of his mind like lifebuoys. I'm a werewolf. I'm planning to hunt down and murder Fenrir Greyback. I spent this whole summer stealing, drinking and fighting. Can't read properly without help. I'm secretly running an illegal trade in Muggle cigarettes. I don't fancy girls at all. None of them. I don't think I ever will. He opened his mouth. Well, I'm Silencio! Sirius shouted suddenly, aiming his wand at Remus, while James tackled him to the floor, clamping a hand over his mouth. Everyone on the Slytherin table burst out laughing as James and Remus struggled together on the floor. Lily watching them, completely nonplussed. Remus's mouth kept moving, desperate to divulge every one of his secrets until he was completely free of them. But not a sound escaped his lips. Sirius was excellent at silencing charms. Together, Peter, Sirius and James hoisted Remus to his feet and dragged him bodily from the dining table, amid a flurry of laughter and jeers from the Slytherins. Only once they were all upstairs and shut inside their dorm did Sirius lift the charm, allowing Remus to speak. By then, fortunately, the urge to tell everyone everything had passed. Sorry, Remus, Sirius said. But I had to do it. You were going to... I know. Remus hung his head, sitting on his bed. Bloody Snape. How long does it take to wear off? Depends on how much you took, I think, James said, flicking through his potions book. Godric, how did he do it? That's Newt level stuff, truth serum. He's the best in the year at potions, Remus supplied unwillingly. Lily said he's already doing 7th year essays, just for fun. What a boring old swot, Sirius snorted, joining James in searching through the book. Try not to say anything, Moony, okay? I can't help it, Remus said without meaning to. Oh, right. It says here you should be clear within 24 hours, so dinner time tomorrow at the very latest. What about lessons? We'll say you're sick. You can't risk it, Moony. I could kill Snape, that filthy, dirty, underhanded... I'm not missing lessons for him. Remus folded his arms. There must be an antidote. We could go and ask Slughorn, James said finally. Yeah, good idea. I think he's still in the Great Hall, Sirius nodded. He turned to Remus and spoke very clearly and slowly, as if he was talking to a child. Remus, stay here. Bugger off. Remus turned away, panting like a little boy. I'll stay with him, James said. You two go. Sirius needed no more than that, and he was bounding down the stairs, calling back, Hang in there, Moony. If I see a Slytherin on my way down, then I'll... But they couldn't hear the rest. Sirius had gone, and Peter with him. There was a long, awkward silence. Remus didn't trust himself to speak. Finally, James did. Sorry I've been a bit of a prat lately. Remus was taken aback and shook his head fiercely. You haven't been. I just wish I could prove to you that I... Wait. Ask me. Huh? Ask me, now, while I'm under a truth serum. Ask me how I feel about Lily. You know it's the truth. Remus, I don't want to, James frowned. It didn't mesh with his idea of good sportsmanship. Go on, Remus encouraged. I really don't mind. It's between you and me, right? He got up and grabbed James by the shoulders, meeting his eyes with confidence. Ask me. Okay then. Remus, do you fancy Lily Evans? Nope, absolutely not. Remus didn't so much as blink. Okay, good. What about Marlene? Nope, never have, never will. They're my friends, like you are. James looked at him very intently. Then his face broke into a genuine smile. He slapped Remus on the back. Thanks, Moony. You're a real mate. Remus laughed. Anytime. Fortunately for Remus, Slughorn was able to provide an antidote almost immediately, though the Marauder's code of honour prevented them from telling him who had laced Remus's drink in the first place. It's better this way, Remus assured them. It'll make him really nervous if he doesn't get in trouble straight away. He'll wonder how we're going to get him back. How are we going to get him back? Sirius asked eagerly, over breakfast on the morning of the Slytherin versus Gryffindor game. He nearly outed you, Moony. We have to teach him a lesson. Let me think about it, Remus replied. Just thrash Slytherin at Quidditch for me first. Easy. Sirius winked. Remus grinned back. It was hard not to grin at Sirius when he was in such a good mood, splendid in his scarlet and gold Quidditch robes, hair pulled off his face, eyes sharp and full of determination. It was the best version of Sirius, and Remus's heart pounded with pride and adrenaline. The tension was palpable in the Quidditch stands before the players had even appeared on the pitch. 2/4 of the stadium was covered in red, jeering and booing at the green section. Quidditch had become a way for the students of Hogwarts to truly show their emotions about the war, and it was extremely ugly. Tensions are high in this year's semi-final, the commentator Tracy Dacey spoke through her magical microphone. This match will of course determine which team goes through to the final against Ravenclaw, And by the looks of the players, it'll be a close one. On Gryffindor we have Potter, of course, a legend in his own right with more than 200 goals under his belt already. Marlene McKinnon there, a formidable beater, and so she should be. Her brother Danny McKinnon, of course, plays professionally for the Chudley Cannons. And there's Sirius Black, Gryffindor's second beater, in his second game of the year. Black has already shown himself to be as competent as McKinnon, and I'm sure all the ladies will agree, doesn't look half bad in his kit. McGonagall's disapproving cough could be heard over the megaphone. Remus noticed that almost every girl in the crowd was either giggling or screaming Sirius's name. "Sorry, Professor," Tracy continued. "And here comes Slytherin." Deafening booing from the crowd here. They have their very own Black on the team, of course, Sirius's younger brother Regulus, Seeker, and Mulciber taken on as beater this term. The boos grew so loud that Remus could barely hear Darcy over the noise. Peter wasn't helping, and kept jumping up and down in his seat. Remus was staying seated as long as he could. His hip was causing him problems again, and he didn't want to exacerbate it. Limpy Lupin was worse than Loony Lupin somehow. Finally, the game began, and both teams shot into the air with incredible force. If the crowd was mean, the players were even worse. With the weight of their houses on their shoulders, it felt like a matter of life or death. Remus had never seen James play so hard, rocketing up and down the pitch like a red bullet, catching and throwing the quaffle faster than the Slytherin keeper could keep track of. Sirius and Marlene were equally fearsome, both working as much more of a team than they had last time, clearly communicating and watching the backs of their fellow teammates. And they really needed to. Slytherin was playing dirty. Twice Sirius had to fend off a bludger that had accidentally flown right into James's path, while Marlene became the Gryffindor Seeker's shadow, protecting him from some very nasty near misses. Remus was so busy watching his three friends, wincing when they came close to danger, cheering their victories, that he had quite forgotten the aim of the game. So has everyone else, it seemed, except for Regulus Black, who flew high above the pitch, then around the outskirts, showing that infamous Slytherin cunning as he sought out the snitch. No one was watching as Regulus Black, the smallest Slytherin team member, caught sight of the tiny golden ball and began to soar down towards it from his incredible height. No one was watching Regulus Black, because they were all watching Sirius swing his bat at a bludger that could so easily have knocked him off his broom. He hit it back so hard that it shot straight back toward Mulciber's face. Mulciber, though stupid, was not slow and swooped down immediately, ducking out of the way, just as Regulus passed behind him. Now Remus saw him. Now everybody did, and a terrible shriek went up as the bludger connected with Regulus's head and knocked him from his broom. They watched in such horror that all Hal's prejudice was forgotten as the limp body of Regulus Black plummeted to the ground.